This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
The United States in End Times Prophecy, hiding in our Bibles in plain sight. That's this week on A View from the Bunker. Who would have thought just a few years ago we'd find ourselves in a world where refusing an experimental medicine could keep you from traveling, going to the store, or even cost you your job? Actually, we did. My novel, The God Conspiracy, was published last year when it suddenly became much more relevant than it had been when I started writing it more than 15 years ago. And I drew on characters and ideas developed by Sharon a few years earlier for her novel, The Armageddon Strain. We'd like to make The God Conspiracy available to you as part of our special offer during the month of August. It's a fast-moving story of people, ordinary people, who find themselves in circumstances beyond their control. And the only ones who really understand what's going on are those who see that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. During the month of August, we'll send you The God Conspiracy and 12 hours of video teachings. Our 2 DVD sets, Unmasking the Ancient Gods and This Is War. 4 discs in all, 12 hours of video teachings. A retail value altogether of $120 for just $35 plus shipping and handling. This offer is only available during the month of August and only at our store. Available online at gilberthouse.org. Is the United States hiding in plain sight in the Bible in terms of its role in end times prophecy? Our guest this week says yes, and she provides her evidence in a brand new book. It is a quick read. I put it on this side of the, there we go. Trying to do this backwards on this side of the microphone. The United States of Israel is the book. It is a quick read, a thin read, but it is content rich. She's been a guest on this program before, several times, in fact, but not since 2013. I'm not really sure why. I got busy, distracted by a shining object, or I'm not quite sure, but she's got some credentials. She was a researcher for Walter Martin, the original Bible Answer Man, journalist and editor of the Christian Sentinel e-zine, former director of Rapture Ready Radio, and author of a book that we've discussed on this program before, The Fleecing of Christianity. It is an honor and a pleasure to welcome back to the program Jackie Alnor. Jackie, welcome to the program. It's been since, I looked it up, since 2013 was the last time I had you on the program, and then it was audio only. That was in the pre-Skype, pre-Zoom days where trying to record video off of our internet connections back then just was not a thing. So welcome back, and it was good to see you at the conference in Colorado Springs. I'm really glad that you came up to Sharon and me. I just wish our table hadn't been so busy so we could have talked there.
You're very popular. Everybody was wanting to say hello to you. I had a longer talk with Sharon than I did with you, but yeah, that was a great conference. Even though I'm so glad I brought my snow scraper to get my car unburied.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't have to drive anywhere. Yeah, it was like 80 degrees when we left the Ozarks, and by the time the conference was over, we'd had 16 inches of snow out there in Colorado Springs?
12 feet, yes.
Well,
that was great.
We really appreciate you giving us a copy of your book and bringing a copy to our table. It's a quick read, 4 chapters, concise, but very thought-provoking. So that's why I wanted to bring you back on the program, besides the fact that it's been too long since you've been a guest here. First, I want to ask you, and I may have asked you this previously, but again, since it's been 9 years, the influence on you of Walter Martin, the original Bible Answer Man. How did Walter Martin influence your approach to studying the Bible and researching topics connected to the Bible?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Walter Martin was the first time after I got saved. I really got saved reading my Bible, and nobody really leading me to the Lord, and no church service or anything like that. And my testimony's online, you can look it up. But the first time I ventured out was to see Walter Martin. And what was in the news at the time when I got saved was the Jim Jones fiasco with the 900 and some odd dead people. And so I didn't want to go. I was afraid to go out and to go anywhere because I thought, well, until I know my Bible, how am I going to know? And so someone invited my sister to Walter Martin's study. And so I went there with her, and we were so impressed, he was at Melody Land at the time. And he did once a week, I think it was Sunday night. And it wasn't in the round. I don't know if you've ever been in Melody Land. It was kind of like a round arena, but it was in the annex of it. But it was fascinating because the other thing that had just come out in the news was the full page ad by the Terror Center that the Christ is here now. And everybody was freaked out about that. And that was, and then Walter came and assured us all because we were supposed to be told telepathically that the Christ was here, right? And a lot of crazy things were happening back then in 1981. And so it was, I felt safe there. But it turned out, after a lot of events, that my sister ended up being his secretary, and then she became the producer of the Bible Answer Man with Walter Martin. And then I did a lot of private research for him because I started getting interested in, became really good friends with Dave Hunt, and who wrote The Seduction of Christianity, and was helping him with research, and I would help Walter Martin and pass things on. And anyway, after I got married, I married a journalist, and then he became the news editor of the Christian Research Journal. And so we had so many connections, but, Dr. Martin influenced me a lot as far as, I think what really stays with me is how courteous he was to those he disagreed with. He didn't come out sniping at people. He was strong, and he had what he called the baptism of boldness. But he didn't name call. He didn't put people down. He wanted to plead with people as his brothers, And at that time, a lot of strange things was creeping into the church that needed addressing. And he did so, with tact. And I think all of us who end up involved in apologetics can get carried away sometimes, And yet at the same time, these conversations need to happen in order for people to test all things and hold on to what is good. That's what we're told to do. And we have to, because there's so many deceptions. There's one ready-made for everybody. And it seems like right after a person gets born again, the cults would come after you from every which way. And until you're grounded in the word, you have no way to know. It all sounds good, even though they all contradict each other. It all sounds good. So, and end times prophecy was all happening at the same time because of my friendship with the Hal Lindsey ministry. And so being in Southern California, you could, you'd watch John MacArthur one day and Chuck Smith, and you had everybody. So I guess I was in some good circles, and I've had other friends that ended up going off, and the Lord bringing them back, and that happens. But that's a long answer because I could just go on. I love Walter Martin. In fact, he did our wedding.
Wow.
In fact, it's I have the tape of that. It's one of the most incredible wedding services you'd ever hear. Oh, it was amazing because he was commissioning us to the defense of the faith at the same time he was joining us in marriage. And my husband passed away in 2011,
mm-hmm.
and I'm carrying on.
It's easy also for us once we get saved and get into a particular denomination, and many of us will choose a church based on whether the people are polite to us when we show up the first time. Mm-hmm. I will honestly say that that's where we wind up. That's how I wound up at the church that I was at as a kid. My parents chose the church when I was in high school. We'd moved out of Chicago and tried one. They weren't very friendly. Tried another one, and they were, even though it wasn't the denomination we'd left in Chicago. They're nice people. They seem nice. Let's go here. And then you just sort of absorb by osmosis what the doctrines or the creeds of that particular church or denomination. And moving outside of that can be kind of risky. I mentioned before we started recording, Sharon and I have been producing a program now called Unraveling Revelation, and we're about 150 episodes in. And we're only up to Revelation 14. And we've come to some conclusions about the book of Revelation that are a little bit different. I've also come to some conclusions about, say, Isaiah 14. I don't think Lucifer was Satan. I think he was another fallen angel by a different name. But when you go out and you say that based on your research and you make your case, there are some folks who don't want to hear it because it's not what they're used to. They don't have an argument really to present against it, but because they've been taught since little that this is that, then if you make the case that this is not that, and I can show you how in the Bible, sorry, you're a heretic. So
yeah. And that's dangerous because they're putting themselves into a box. With systematic theology can do that, especially when they give no room to look at other things with an open mind because they've gotten too boxed in. And like writing this book, it was risky for me to write this book because some of the cults teach a version of it. And and so, if that happens, then you're going to be called a crackpot or something like that because you can't look and see. I mean, remember that the angel told Daniel that they'll understand in the end. It may be close to you now, but they're going to come and go to and fro, and then knowledge will increase.
Right.
Well, when you're stuck with your systematic theology, knowledge can't increase. We certainly have to test all things by Scripture, but let's test it by Scripture and not by church creeds. In fact, I call those kinds of apologists creedal apologists. When they aren't testing by the Bible, but they're testing by their catechism.
And that's absolutely right. And I will say for the record that I don't presume to declare myself to be right about everything. But I think there are some things that we figured out that, I can make a case for. But especially when you get into the realm of end times prophecy, I think God has deliberately, as you say, obscured some things for the time of the end. Certainly the apostles who learned directly from Jesus for 3+ years didn't understand his mission until after he'd gone. We probably won't understand the prophecies of his second coming any better, in part because Jesus is the greatest general in history, and he's not going to reveal his entire battle plan to the enemy until they're staring across the battlefield at him, leading the army. So we try to be a little more gentle about some of these end times prophetic things, but this is really one that especially us American Christians are always wondering about. I mean, okay, we're the wealthiest nation in human history. Some of the luster has faded from the rose, if you will, but we're still the world's only superpower, you can argue, although China would probably dispute that. But there's nothing in end times prophecy in the Bible that is obviously a reference to the United States. And your book, if I am understanding your thesis correctly, Jackie, you're essentially saying that we're sort of hiding in plain sight. Do I have that right?
Yes, we are hiding in plain sight. We are different than any other nation. We're only, 250 years old or whatever. And we're a nation that brought together many scattered people all over the Western world who were being mainly persecuted by their faith because of their faith in Jesus Christ. I mean, when you think of somebody back around that time, like John Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress from prison because he was arrested for preaching without a license. And then you can see how these, besides the Roman Catholic Church, the Church of England, they were persecuting. You couldn't just be a believer. You had to be with one or the other. And of course, back in those days with England, and Britain, it was Catholic one time, and then the next guy comes on and it's Church of England and Henry VIII's religion. And you had to conform which way. Everybody was telling you what to believe and how to believe. And when our nation came together and we got the First Amendment, that there would be no establishment of religion, that flew in the face of everybody. I mean, you had to be Lutheran if you were in Germany, you had to be a Calvinist, or a Presbyterian. So we were the only place that the Lord, I believe, and you can't convince me it wasn't the Lord that brought them, our forefathers here, to give them that freedom to worship.
I agree.
And how can that be an accident of history? And it wasn't an accident of history. And so there's a lot of groups that have tried to follow of course, we understand that there were two, that the house of Israel was split into two, the northern house and the southern house. One was, the kingdom of Judah, which was with the Levites, and somebody said Benjamin too, because there were some Benjamites that came down too, but there were also Asher, someone who's pointed out the woman in the temple, and I think where's the name of that, where Jesus was dedicated, she was of the house of Asher, or the tribe. So there were 12 tribes, but there were the 2 southern tribes and the 10 northern tribes. And of course, in 720 BC, there was the Assyrian captivity, where the northern tribes, because of their idolatry, and all these horrible things. I mean, what can you say? That's been the record of God's chosen people, building the golden path, chasing after other gods. And God kept the southern kingdom more in place and to really disperse the northern kingdom. And some were left over, such as those that ended up being called the Samaritans. Mm-hmm. They were like one of the remnants, because they were not the Jews. Some people will say, well, all the people who are Jews, they're all of Israel. I say, well, all Jews are part of Israel, but all Israelites are not Jews. The Samaritans were Israelites, and they were not Jews. Because remember, at the woman at the well, the very first person that Jesus showed himself to be the Messiah was to a Samaritan woman, and the apostles, what is she doing talking to this woman, and a Samaritan woman of all things? Well, she says, I come to this well to draw water. And he promises her the water that would come up from within and bubble up and all of that. And she was like, how are you going to give me that water? Well, then the statement, then she says that this is our father Jacob's well. Jacob dug this well.
Right.
So, right. And people say the salvation comes from the Jews. See, she's referring to the Jews as something other than what she was. And then there's even a parenthesis in there where they say, and the Jews wanted nothing to do with the Samaritans. And it's just so precious of the Lord Jesus Christ to reveal himself to her, and she goes and tells her people, and then they believe after they come to see Jesus. And so he's said many times that he only came to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and that was the first one that he revealed himself to. And it said in there that the Jews wanted nothing to do with the Samaritans. So who are the descendants of the Samaritans? Because their descendants are as much a part of the 12 tribes of Israel as any of the southern tribes. And the southern tribe, the southern kingdom, can't claim all 12 for their own when they were all ended up being just during, the different diasporas. So my thesis is, I believe that you follow where the gospel was sent in the first century, and then you know where those lost sheep of the house of Israel were. And when you see where Christianity took root and with whom, then that gives you a clue as to where they were, because that's who he was sent for. And then when he saved those out of those places, then they went to the ends of the earth from there. So historically, it makes sense, but the thing that people have to understand is the promises to the fathers, and they were without repentance, that they would be as numerous as the sands of the sea, that they would be a company of nations, many nations. And at the end times, it would come down to two nations. And how could they be a commonwealth of nations, and yet in with the two sticks in Ezekiel 37,
right?
There are two nations, and there's two nations in Israel. Well, how could there be only two nations? What happened to all those other nations? And I'm telling you what happened to all those other nations. They all came here. They all came to America. And that was the foundation. Just as there were 13 tribes when you split Joseph in half, there were 13 colonies, and that was the foundation of America. And they were all here to escape. Maybe some didn't come here to escape persecution, but many did. You had the Mennonites, the Quakers, the Puritans, the Moravians, so many different peoples just wanting to worship God in the way they want to worship God. And he had a hand in that. And it's so obvious that that when you know they have to be as numerous as the sands of the sea, I believe they're a quarter of of Earth's population. I really do. And because they have to be as the stars of heaven. And you can't say that about the population of Israel.
No, that's true. That's true. For all of the influence that Israel has on world geopolitics, when you look at the list of the top 10 religions on earth in terms of number of adherents, Jews are not even among the top 10. So that was startling to me as I was looking this up. I wrote a book on Islam a few years ago, and was okay. We got the Zoroastrians here, we got the Jainists here. Where are the Jews? I think there's like 14 million on planet Earth, on a planet of 7.5, getting close to 8 billion by the middle of this century. There are a couple, as you alluded to, there are a couple of deviant beliefs that get very close to what you're saying. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that, because the enemy will always try to throw out a deception, and the best deception is one that's partially true. You make reference to essentially British Israelism, this idea that the Anglo-Saxon people are the true Jews. And then there's another that kind of goes a little farther in the other direction, this idea that Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, which represents the house of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, that we are the Ephraimites and we need to go back and start following the law in order to rejoin the two sticks of Ezekiel 37. Both of those miss the mark, but people, I think, will want to know, how does your thesis in the United States of Israel differ from what, say, Herbert W. Armstrong and the Worldwide Church of God put forward?
Yes. Well, first of all, the people who were trying to say they were somebody other than the Jews didn't count. I say that the Jews coming back in 1948 to Israel, that was also, of course, a God thing and a fulfillment of prophecy. And some of the ones that are teaching, against that, and that's anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
This is not anti-Semitism. As a matter of fact, seeing that they are our brothers. They are our brothers. It's the exact opposite of anti-Semitism. It is acknowledging that God brought them back to the land just as he said he would, and that all through the diasporas, only of all the ones that, the Syrian and the Babylonian and then the Roman, all those diasporas, a remnant came back. And even all the way into 1948, only a remnant. There's as many Jews in America as there are in Israel.
Yeah.
And so you see remnants return. And so if you only follow those remnants throughout history, let's say after the Roman, diaspora of the Jews, what happened to all the other millions and millions and millions of people who had gone before, who were part of the remnant that returned? They were scattered about. And so I don't see America as Manasseh, as Herbert Armstrong thought that England was Ephraim and we were Manasseh. No, I see where those tribes went way before America came into being. That's something recent, that they already established all those nations ahead of time. And it was from those nations that we were established. And so we have them all. We have all 12 or 13 if you like. And if people want to argue, well, you're a British Israelite, I'm saying my thesis, it doesn't matter where you're from. We were all brought here. This is a nation of a melting pot of all. Whether you think it's this country or that country, what country isn't established in America? What people? I mean, my DNA is from everywhere, as yours probably is. That's what makes us American. That's very different than any other place. And not only that, Christianity took root here more than any other place also. And so we had the blessings of God upon us. God bless America. And now, of course, the enemy is after America first. And the enemies of Israel say that they're the little Satan and America is the big Satan. And so that too, who do they hate? Who do they hate and why? It's jealousy.
Yeah.
Envy that we're hated and that Israel is hated.
It's
land of Israel hated.
Very, very interesting that you get into some of the political issues that I deal with on Skywatch TV as part of the daily news updates. But from a biblical perspective, when you look at the globalist agenda of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, that is the fulfillment of prophecies. They want to bring us back into a global kingdom, just as Nimrod tried to establish back in the day. The Antichrist will do the same thing in the end times. And the World Economic Forum is laying the infrastructure for that global kingdom. But just to make it clear, without trying to put too fine a point on it, for those watching this, and I'll remind you, this book is a quick read. This will not. You can read this in an evening and absorb this concept. It's content rich, but a quick read. You believe that there will be the 12 tribes, as per the book of Revelation, 144,000 from the 12 tribes of Israel will be called out. Literally, that will literally be fulfilled.
Absolutely. And not only that, that just proves that God knows who they are.
Yeah.
Maybe we can't specifically point them out, but God knows. And I'm telling you that I expect to see 12,000 Jews being part of the 144,000. And maybe some of the false people who are trying to say that they're not the true Jews, they're going to be surprised, right? When 12,000 Jews are sealed. Because they're going to be from each of the tribes. So God knows who they are. God cares about who they are because his promises are not going to be swept aside in spite of our rebellion. Because the state of Israel, which when I went to Israel, and we spoke about that earlier, we stayed, the second time we stayed in the West Bank, believe it or not. My husband was a cheapskate. He had to stay at the West Bank because he got the best hotels. And they told us that all the policies of America are established in Tel Aviv. That's what and then somebody else said that Israel is the 51st state. And that was the first time I was really starting to hear some of this because that was from the enemy's perspective. Okay, that's the way they see us. We're the big Satan. They got to take the little Satan out before they can go after the big Satan. But see, all the powers are coming together. You've got now the alignment of Russia with Turkey and Iran, which again, we're looking at the setup for Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38, right after, the two sticks are joined. And it's the way that America, I was surprised the other day, they said when Biden was over in Israel, that he promised no matter what, and I was surprised for it coming from Biden, who is a puppet, basically, in my opinion, that he said that if Israel was attacked, we would send all our stuff, we would be there. They were promising. Even someone who isn't really pro-Israel like Trump was, is still promising them to be there for them. And as I wrote in my book, the study of the Gog and Magog war, Ezekiel 38, with the when he comes down against the land of Israel, this was an interesting thing because while God and his companions are attacking Israel, it says he's down there attacking them, and then a thought comes in his head to go up against the land of unwalled villages. Now, what is the land of unwalled villages? And how does he go up against that when he's already in Israel attacking Israel? And that's when I believe that when they see us as a threat when they're attacking Israel, they decide to come after us. Now that's a pretty big hook in the jaw because we are there we say we will defend them and they have to stop us from defending Israel. And so they will come up over the North Pole, up against the land of unwalled villages. And it's just so interesting in the last administration how it was our unguarded walls. It was build the wall. Right. That's because we don't have walls. We're all over Israel. Israel is a fortified nation. Even look it up in your concordance, the word fortified. He brings them back and they're fortified. Not here. Here we're unwalled. It's so funny. I watch this lady on YouTube all the time. I love her. Her name is Itchy Boots is the name of her show. It's my favorite show because she travels the world on a motorcycle. This 30-year-old blonde woman from Holland. And she went all through South America, Central America, and Mexico. And just this week, she passed into America. And she decided she didn't want to go up through Tijuana because it was the biggest one in the world, basically, of the border crossing. So she went about 100 miles east, crossing into California. I forget the name of the state she came through. And, she stopped at these different places where she had to show her passport. And Mexico didn't have any crossing. And so she got everything okay from these different offices she went into to show the passport and the visa. And then, it was that way to America. So she goes over there and she's going, well, where's the crossing? Where's the crossing? And a bunch of guys coming towards her, a bunch of guys in the middle of the street. In fact, look it up. It was just on today, Itchy Boots. And so here she is coming into America from Mexico. And these guys are coming towards her. And she goes, am I in Mexico or America? And they go, no, you're in America. This is America. She goes, well, where was the crossing? Go, hey, no, we don't crossing. And they're going in, and she's going out, and there wasn't nobody stopping anybody in the direction. I was shocked at that. But look it up. It's today's episode of Itchy Boots.
I will check that out.
We got no protection. We are without walls. We are unprotected.
So this is another example of one of those doctrines that we'd sort of take for granted as, sort of like the received text. This is the way it's going to play out, and the land of unwalled villages is Israel, ignoring the fact that they've got walls all over the place in Israel right now, separating the Palestinian zones from the Israeli zones. Those will be destroyed at some point. Yeah. Yeah, but
they call their missiles that go everywhere and intercept everything. The Iron Dome is that what it's called? The Iron Dome?
Israel's Iron Dome. But in fact, I guess we're talking to Israel about possibly getting the Iron Dome over here, which might be a good thing. But then, of course, Russia just deployed that submarine that they said has that underwater nuclear drone that would kick up a 1,500-foot radioactive tsunami.
Right off the Atlantic coast.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're unprotected.
And the spoil that they would see, certainly there's a lot more spoil here in the United States than Israel. I know there have been prophecy teachers who said, well, they found oil in the Golan Heights. They found natural gas out in the Leviathan field and the Tamar field out in the Eastern Mediterranean. But compared to what Russia's already got, that's like small potatoes. It's nothing. It's a drip compared to what Russia's already got. But United States, we've got natural resources here that would certainly be very useful. We just don't want to dig for them because, it would mess up the backyard. Boy, I had never really thought about this. This is an interesting take on this. What's been the reaction to this from people who've read your book so far, Jackie?
You know what? The average person says, wow, I've heard these things, but it didn't come together until I read this. Now I understand. And because they'll hear pieces of this, and now they just, because of the cults that have taught us a similar thing, even though it isn't the whole picture. And yet, one unnamed critic of mine called me a crackpot.
Forgetting about your body of work and the fact that you were working for Walter Martin, whose whole ministry was in holding to the truth of the scriptures.
That's it. And that's what I cut my teeth on. And so, not only does it stand up to scripture, it takes care of loose ends. Because if God promised that these descendants were going to be many nations, and in fact, a specific promise, if you look up Jacob's promise to his son Joseph, he would be even many nations. So he isn't just, if he's England, that's fine, but he himself, his descendants would be many nations. Well, then you tell me where that's at. If you can't tell me what nations those are, then you're saying God lied. God's not a liar.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They are many nations, whatever they happen to be. But I figured the reason we could see who they had to be was following where the gospel went, in where the 12 were sent. Even the book of James addresses the 12 tribes, not just the 10, but the 12.
In the diaspora. That's right. That's right.
Diaspora, yes.
Huh. So when will these two sticks, the stick of Judah and the stick of Ephraim, come together? Will this be before Gog Magog? Will this? Do you want to speculate? Will the rapture take place prior to this?
Well, see, that's the speculation, because if you are going, if Ezekiel was written for chronological prophecy, it would be before. But as we know, even some prophecies would be like prophecies about the first coming of the Lord, but then all of a sudden jump over to the second coming of the Lord. And so these things are hard to decipher. You can get a general idea, but the specifics, as you mentioned earlier, that even the apostles didn't know the exact specifics until the thing happened, and they looked back and said, "Oh, did he not say?" And so that's the same thing here. Is we can understand and believe that God meant what he said when he said that their descendants would be as the stars in the heavens, and that they'd be many, many, and they would be many nations. We know that. And we also know that they have to be summed up into two nations at the end, because those two sticks have to come back together. And, it would get kind of complicated, but I spell it out in the book as far as the two sisters and the two wives, of Hosea, and that one, Lola, Ami, or however, would be not my people, and later she would be my people. And so that wasn't the southern tribe that was rejected. It was the northern 10 tribes that were cut off. There's even passages where they're going to forget the ark. In other words, they're going to forget the ark of the covenant. They're going to forget all of that. And indeed they did. And then at the end times, he's going to judge them the same way he's going to judge all 12. And that's what it comes down to. And if we're in the end times, then that has to all be coming around. Now, I felt that the joining together of Netanyahu and Trump was very prophetic. And they had these big banners all over Israel after we moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Right?
We just happened to be there on that day. Our tour, our first tour of Israel, we didn't plan it that way, but Sharon said, "Oh, that's the 70th anniversary date for Israel's Declaration of Independence. Let's schedule it around that." And of course, it just happened. That was the day that the embassy moved, and we saw the signs all over. In fact, on my wall over there, I've got a copy of the Jerusalem Post. Promises made, promises kept. Thank you, Mr. President. It's framed on the wall. That's I wish I'd grabbed more, because they were handing them out to everybody at the hotel that morning, and I didn't think, hey, wait.
Yeah, he was taking us in that direction. Of the bigger joining together of the two countries, and the devil came against them both at the same time.
Yeah.
Heavily.
It's
So,
going to be interesting to see what happens this fall with the next election in Israel, and then of course 2024 here in the U.S. But they at the very least they stand up against the globalist agenda, and that is something that the powers at Davos cannot allow.
but see, all that has to happen too, because you have to have the rebirth of the Roman Empire, I believe, and of course the EU, and I don't think it's any, the fact that all of this is coming out of Germany. Why is Germany always the nation that's wanting to get things back? They just want all that power back. This Schwab guy. People compare him to Dr. Evil. It's kind of, but it's funny, but it's not so funny because you see the power grab. There's that song back in the day called "Everybody Wants to Rule the World." I think Tears for Fears did that song. And that's what it boils down to. It's time everybody wants to rule the world. And I saw some headline yesterday or today with Putin says, we're the new world order. Okay. So those three nations are the new world order. They got the new world order over here. Then Biden and the former George Bush were the new world order. Everybody wants to be the new world order, and they're all wanting to claim supremacy. They all want to be the one at the top of the hill. And I wonder also about the rise of the antichrist and how there'd be, the 10 nations, and then three would rise up, and then one's going to pull up those three. Some of these things are very hard to understand, but if you start seeing it more from the perspective of where I believe the antichrist is going to come up, I believe he's going to come up from those northern tribes, be it here or there. And the reason I believe that is because the references to him not paying attention to the faith of the fathers. I wasn't talking about Zoroastrians. No, he'd be of the faith of his fathers, which isn't Islam. And at the same time, we call him an Assyrian. Well, the Assyrian captivity and all those who went north. I quoted from a friend of Jimmy DeYoung who interviewed this Jewish guy who said that the tribes were then referred to as Assyrians after they were taken up there. And so that was written around the same time where they were referred to as Assyrians because they were taken up into Assyria, and that's the last they saw of them. So I believe all those passages, all those things can come together and still be true, and you're not going to have anything dangling, no hanging chards.
It's well, like I said, I think we'll only recognize it when we're seeing it in the rearview mirror, and I hope and pray that we don't see it until we're up and looking down at what's transpiring on the earth, because it's certainly not going to be a pleasant time on this world until things are restored to the original design by the designer. This again, Jackie, this is a really thought-provoking read. Where do people get a copy of your book, The United States of Israel?
Well, it's on Kindle on Amazon, and you could also get it on your Kindle, or it's print for view, or print on demand, print on demand at Amazon. And I hope everybody reads it and just test it by Scripture, and don't let presuppositions get in the way of answering those questions, because you have to say, who are the sands of the sea? And, perhaps some people, especially who believe in replacement theology, that the church has replaced Israel and all of that, they might argue that it's that we replaced Israel, even though, because you see, as Christians, it's whosoever will. It doesn't matter what tribe you're of to be a believer. But as you say, when we're taken out and the 12,000 are sealed, it isn't going to be Christians, because God knows who they are genetically.
Yeah.
Whether they're, and some might even be professing Christians who really weren't saved, but, who were Christians in name only and were left behind.
Well,
who knows?
According to survey after survey from the Barna Group, there are a lot of Christians in name only in this country. It was like 9% with a biblical worldview of American adults, but only like 17%. I forget the numbers now, but it's a small percentage of professing Christians who actually have a biblical worldview. So, We'll see it all someday, and look forward to chronicling the history of it when it's all over and done. Sharon and I are praying for jobs in the heavenly archives when the new heaven, the new earth is established. That's the job that we're praying for. But however it pans out, God's got all of this under control. United States of Israel by Jackie Alnor. Encourage you to read it. Again, it's a thought-provoking read, but a quick read, and shines. It's a different perspective on the way this all plays out. And if you're right, Jackie, then the United States has been staring us in the face in our Bibles all the way along. And so thank you for sharing that with us, and look forward to talking with you again and more frequently.
And thank you for your bravery and letting me come on.
I'll have links in the show notes wherever you're watching or consuming this particular program, whether it's VFTB.net, which is the home page for us here, or our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gilbert House. Check the links below for where you can find a copy of the United States of Israel and some of Jackie's other work. And it's well researched. And again, she recognizes, as she admits, that it sounds a lot like some deviant end times beliefs, like British Israelism, replacement theology. But as she makes clear in the book and in our discussion, God still has a definite plan for the people of Israel, for the Jews. But we need to remember that Jew is just sort of a shortened form of Judahite. And there are 11 other tribes in the book of Revelation that will also be sealed in the time of the end. So it'll be the Judahites, but also the Issacharites, the Zebulunites, the Gadites, Simeonites, the Levites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something that we as Christians forget. We as non-Jews, non-Israelis forget that there are, the history there is of Israel really divides first with the rebellion of Jeroboam against Rehoboam, and then with the destruction of the northern kingdom about 250 years later, when the Assyrians come in and cart off the northern tribes. And even that's kind of a misnomer, because Simeon was the southern tribe as well. But as she pointed out, in the Epistle of James, he directs his letter to the Jews, or all 12 tribes rather, not just Jews, but all 12 tribes in the diaspora. And if you're going to pick a nation of the world that since its beginning really has been sort of a melting pot, you can look no farther than the United States of America. So is she right? Well, she makes a good argument. Don't know. I've got my own thoughts on the war of Gog and Magog, but I've discussed that elsewhere, so we won't rehash that here. And as I said to Jackie before we began the program, I have learned as I've gotten a little older to be a little more gracious with people when my ideas differ from theirs. Because contrary to what I thought coming up in elementary school, I am not the smartest person in every room that I'm in, which still galls me to no end. But I'll pray that the Lord will give me grace to get over that. Well, we've got a conference coming up that we want to tell you about just a couple of weeks away, the Dark Secrets, Bright Hopes Conference. Pastor Dave Bryan, who we have learned since being invited to speak, is a fan like we are of the movie The Princess Bride, which is one of very few films that is absolutely perfect. Don't change the scene. I know they're talking about making remaking the film. That would be an abomination, quite honestly. I am saying that tongue-in-cheek, not using that word in the same way God uses the term, but there's no call for it. Anyway, anyone who can quote lines from The Princess Bride is okay in my book. Pastor Dave Bryan is hosting. L.A. Marzulli, Timothy Alberino, and yours truly. Sharon will be there with me, but she's going there to cheer me on. We will be speaking September 15th through 17th at Church of Glad Tidings in Live Oak, California. That's north of Yuba City, Sacramento area north, and that should be a really interesting, thought-provoking weekend. So you can find out more at the website of the church, churchofgladtidings.com. Again, Pastor Dave Bryan hosting us there, and we're looking forward to seeing L.A. and Tim in the same setting. I'm not sure that we've all been at the same conference before, maybe one of the True Legends conferences. But this should be really something. And next spring, we will be back in the Holy Land, and we invite you to join us in Israel as Sharon and I, along with our friend Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat, will take you on a tour that is like no other in Israel. March 19th through 30th, with an optional 3-day extension over to Jordan. We will see Gilgal Rephaim. We will visit the altar of Joshua. We will go to Shiloh. And of course, we'll see the sights that you want to see. We'll go out on the Sea of Galilee. We'll visit Jerusalem. We plan to ascend to the Temple Mount. We did that last time, and we look forward to doing that again. Masada, just absolutely awe-inspiring. The view of the Dead Sea and the mountains of Moab on the other side of the Dead Sea from there. And then from the Jordan side, as we look down on the valley from Mount Nebo, look across to Jericho, see what Moses saw when he got his only look at the Promised Land. And then from there, we can point out, okay, yeah, Jericho's at 12 o'clock, at 2 o'clock over there. That's the site of ancient Sodom. And we'll talk about why all of these places are historically and prophetically significant. More information at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel. From there, you can go to the Lipkin Tours website and reserve your spot. We hope you'll join us. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen wherever you are consuming this podcast, whether it's in video form. We encourage you to get our free mobile app, also our free Roku app. That gets you all of our video content. The mobile app also gets you some news updates from my blog and calendar of our upcoming events as well. But we're also at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Our announcer is the inimitable D.C. Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.